Before we start the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. And now, let's go. Story 1. It was my uncle's housekeeper that informed me he'd gone missing, being that I was the only relative to have kept in contact with him over the years. The others, it seemed, had been consumed by their own busy lives or else were too disturbed by my uncle's eccentricities to visit. Over time, Silas had developed an obsession with collecting objects of spiritual and paranormal interest, amassing such a number of them that he had become something of a hoarder. I'd been the one to employ his housekeeper, Claire, ignoring my uncle's grumbling protests. Nearing his late 70s, he was in need both of help cleaning his home and of company, the benefits of which he came grudgingly to enjoy. He even offered Claire a room in the upper floors of the house, which due to his worsening arthritis he seldom used. And so I was satisfied that if anything were to happen, there would at least be an able-bodied person at hand to help him. What I did not expect was to learn from a panicked phone call that my uncle had vanished from the house sometime the previous day and could not be found. I went over at once, thinking it unlikely that he'd gotten far on his bad hip, and certainly not without being noticed. My uncle always dressed in an eccentric fashion, leading him to become something of an icon referred to by the locals as the Wizard of Goad Street. Upon my arrival at the house, I found Claire looking red-eyed and agitated, which was unusual for a woman I'd always found to be reassuringly bland. "I don't have a clue where he went," she said. "I didn't hear any of the doors opening, but I've looked for him all over and I can't see him anywhere. I don't know what he's thinking. He's been acting so strange this past week." "Stranger than usual?" I asked, glancing around the living room. There were new additions to my uncle's trove, including a Victorian lamp and what I took to be a large mirror hung up and covered by a fringe shawl. Peering in its direction, I felt an odd pull towards it, the urge to tug down that sheath of fabric in order to look into the glass beneath. Choosing to ignore it, I said, "What do you mean by strange anyway, Claire?" She turned up her hands in a helpless motion. "He went out in the middle of the night last Thursday, to start with. I asked him where he was going, and he said it was some kind of antiques emporium that wouldn't open at any other time. Only after dark, he said. Well, there are places like that now. Night cafes, bookshops. They're opening all over town now. So I said I'd drive him there and parked up outside, waiting for him to come out." Claire's eyes shifted to the mirror, and I realized that it was she that had hidden it, that she could barely stand to have in the room. I wonder why. Unlike the absent relations, Claire had never been remotely superstitious and had only shaken her head at my uncle's insistence that the alleged histories of his treasures were a reality. "I didn't like the look of the place," said Claire. "It was in a run-down area, and the windows were filthy. But the shop was open, and Silas went in. He was gone for about half an hour, and I started wondering if I should go in after him. Then he came out with a package under his arm, wrapped up in paper, and when I got out of the car to help him, he wouldn't let me touch it." Claire pulled her cardigan tighter around herself, seeming chilled despite the August heat. "Silas insisted on hanging the mirror himself, and spent a good hour just standing there looking at it. I couldn't work out what he was doing, but it gave me the creeps. In the end, I told him to come away from it, and he stared at me as though he'd forgotten I was even there. I asked him what he was doing, and he said he'd been told by one of the salespeople at the shop that the mirror would change him. How exactly, I don't know, but I think he was hoping it would help him with his walking. He's getting on now. Old people have a lot to worry about. So with the magic mirror then," I said, half laughing. "Christ, he really is getting worse, isn't he?" Claire's mouth didn't even twitch. "I couldn't even look at the mirror myself," she said. "Not straight on, anyway. Once your uncle went up to bed, I hid it away and put the receipt in the drawer. I kept thinking I should just take it back. Every day, I'd catch Silas pulling that shawl up to look in the glass. Well, it can't have been doing him any good, standing around for so long like that. I noticed him getting stiff, limping about with a sore hunch. Even his face, it was going all lopsided. I was getting concerned about his health. I was going to call the doctor, but then Silas went missing, so I came to you instead. I cleared a box of miscellaneous junk off a nearby chair and offered it to Claire, noting how pale she turned over the course of the conversation. She took it gratefully. "You say you've looked all over the house for him," I said. "Both floors." "I have. What about the neighbors? They have security cameras. Maybe he was picked up in some of the footage. Oh, I've already been round and asked. Nothing. I've spoken to the police, but they weren't taking it too seriously. I can't explain it. It's like he's just disappeared, but obviously he can have done. Can he? I know that. Hearing the distress in Claire's voice, I found a box of tissues on the table and passed it over to her. It's all right, I said. He'll turn up. I might try and visit the antique shop, see if I can speak to the owner or whoever works there, and see what exactly they told my uncle about the mirror. If there's some ritual they've told him to do, then maybe he's gone out to perform it and gotten lost. Wouldn't be the first time he's wandered off like this. Claire dabbed pitifully at her face with the sodden tissue. I know. It's just I have this awful feeling. I wish I could just throw that thing away. This directed at the mirror, which, unable to restrain my curiosity, I crossed the room to examine for myself. It wasn't very large, the frame of a black gilt, the glass murky, not with dirt but with the effect of a window looking out into a dark fog. There again was that unpleasant sense of needing to be close to it almost against my will. And before I knew it, I was staring into the mirror at my reflection, which had been so warped by the glass that my left eye seemed to have been pulled down my face by an invisible hand. Then Claire was tugging at my shoulder and attempting to shield the mirror with the old shawl once again. "Don't look at it," she said, and couldn't say why, only stared at me, her eyes pleading defeated. She wouldn't leave my side until I'd left the room, ushered into the study in which the receipts for Silas' collection had been kept for many years. It was the only room he'd insisted on having any particular organization, stating the importance of holding onto every record of purchase in case something was wrong or went wrong, the necessity of the distinction passing me by. I found a receipt for the mirror in a drawer marked it. Elskin's Emporium had apparently sold the item to my uncle for 3 figures, which I considered shockingly overpriced. There was a phone number on the receipt, which, when tried, wasn't functional, and an address pointing to the outskirts of a nearby village. A thorough internet search found no report of the shop's existence in the area, nor was there any record of the business itself having been registered. There was nothing to be done except visit the Emporium myself during opening hours and hope that Silas turned up in the meantime. I drove into the village that evening, finding the shop at the end of a street populated mainly by shuttered windows, a barber shop and a nail bar, closed for the evening at the far end. Other than that there was very little nearby, but rows of terraced houses and a strip of dreary countryside bisected by the road. Approaching the Emporium, which was as dingy and unwelcoming as Claire had described, I saw that it, too, was closed, only the nearby streetlight illuminating the windows. The furniture within was in boxes or covered with dust sheets, clearly intended to be packed up and taken away, but there were still several mirrors left up on the walls, all with the same unpleasant quality as that which my uncle had taken home with him. There was clearly nobody inside the shop, and likely hadn't been for several days. A voice piped up from behind me, confirming my suspicions. They've been shut since last week. Not even been there that long, and it seems like they've given up already. A middle-aged woman stood with a baby on her hip at her front doorstep, watching me with interest. "So they're shutting down?" I said. "It's weird that they even set up here to start with. Not as if they've made it easy for them to be found." The woman nodded eagerly. Exactly what I said. Probably a front for something, money laundering, maybe. They had a fair few customers, mind you, and they all looked the type to be interested in all that esoteric stuff. I had a look in there myself, but it wasn't for me. The staff were a bit odd as well. Very overkeen. Seemed desperate to be rid of everything. I looked into the shop again, furrowing my brow. Esoteric, the woman had said, but I began to notice symbols and wicked little faces on the spines of books and carved into the woodwork of chairs, and knew that what the clients sought was magic. Though I myself didn't believe in it, I saw clearly where my uncle's recent behavior had sprung from. "Did you ever see the owner at all?" I asked. "I've been wanting to talk to him, but it's like he doesn't exist." At this, the woman took on the same look I'd seen on Claire's face, and the baby began to fuss, picking up on the change in her mood. "Me and my daughter both saw him," said the woman. "The owner. Early Friday morning while it was still dark. We were up with the baby, having a cup of tea, when my daughter said, 'Who's that?' and pointed out of the window over there." At this, the woman gestured to the street. her finger tracing up and down as though following the movements of an unseen figure. There was a man heading up to the door, only he wasn't walking, more going along on his hands with his legs dragging behind him. I thought, well, maybe he's been in an accident or something. I was going to help him get into the shop. I saw he had the keys in his pocket and realized he must be locking up. My daughter stopped me from going out. "There's something wrong with him," she said. "Something doesn't feel right." So we stood and watched him, and I could see what she meant by it. It's like his body wasn't properly human, and he was just trying to pass it off that way. Like putting an animal in a costume. His arms were turned round wrong. His legs twisted into each other and held up off the ground like the back end of a beetle. And the way he moved, it was like it hurt, but he was quick. Must have been used to it. When he got to the door, I couldn't think how he'd get the key in the lock, but he just reared up against the wall, twitching about. Then he must have realized we were watching, because suddenly he turned to look round over his shoulder and his face. The woman made a twisting gesture with her hand I couldn't distinguish and shrugged her shoulders. "I can't describe it," she said. My daughter couldn't either when we were talking about it afterwards. It was just horrible. I was glad I'd not gone out in the end. I just have a feeling something would have happened. I don't know what. She shifted the baby to the other hip, jiggling it up and down to soothe it. "I'd leave all this," she said to me. "Don't go looking for that man. Just leave him alone. Don't buy any of his stuff, either. Like I said, I have no idea what he was up to, but I wouldn't want to be involved." I sighed, realizing I'd arrived at another dead end. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. "Doesn't look like the shop will reopen again, anyway." I made a move to return to my car. Only the woman stopped me, her expression softer, maternal. "I hope you don't mind me asking, love," she said, "but have you recently had a stroke?" I burst out laughing, too surprised to be immediately insulted. True, I wasn't the most good-looking man, but I certainly wasn't ugly enough to have ever anticipated receiving that type of remark. "I wasn't trying to be rude," said the woman hastily, clearly embarrassed. "It's just my husband had one a few years ago, and I just thought, never mind. Sorry if I've caused offense." She scurried back into the house, but I saw her again at the front window, watching me as I drove away, her face almost touching the glass. Upon returning to my uncle's home, I went to the mirror again and lingered before it for some time, lost in thought. The mysteries I'd failed to solve had nipped at me endlessly since leaving the village. Yet all thoughts left me then, but the mirror and the strange, warped quality of the glass, which had apparently called people like my uncle to pay great amounts in order to possess it. I only stepped away from the mirror upon hearing Claire enter the room, throwing the shawl back down with the clumsy velocity of a child caught in some misdeed. "Adrian," said Claire, and at once I was alert to a hysteria in her, held at bay by considerable restraint. "I think I've heard your uncle somewhere in the house." Relief came to me in such a rush that I felt almost ill. "Well, thank God for that," I said. "Where is he?" "In one of the studies, I think. He must have been hiding on purpose for me not to have seen him, but I don't know. I've not dared open the door." "What?" I said. "Why not?" Claire's eyes flicked across my face, then away again, unable to settle. "Just come with me," she said, her tone odd. "If he's hurt, I'll need help to lift him." I followed, thinking that my uncle's mind had gone, or that his joints had given way at last. Claire showed me into the study, lit only by a desk lamp that cast a greenish light across the room. I saw the objects littering the ornate desk in a right-hand corner had been knocked on their sides or off the surface entirely by the force of something crawling rapidly beneath. That something was still there. I could smell a body unwashed, dirty clothes, and another scent I couldn't identify, but that I felt I knew. "Uncle," I said, bending down slightly. "Are you there?" "It's Adrian." I heard the shuffling of fabric dragged against floorboards, the mumbling of what I took to be my name. Then a head protruded from the shadows under the desk, and as I stooped down level with it, I saw my uncle as he now was. I thought of the woman I'd met in the street, the bizarre wrenching gesture of her hand in the air. That was how my uncle appeared, his jaws having been wrenched to an upright angle, yellow teeth cutting through the thin epidermis of his cheek, his limbs suffering an inexplicable torsion and near impossible to use. His eyes had been crushed in the pinched pricks of his sockets, blinding him completely. There was nothing in that inner gloom but fluid and the remnants of what strands had held the organs in. I would have thought Silas to have been struck by a car had I not known he'd never left the house, that this change had come about from within. "It's that mirror," said Claire at a near scream. "He stared at it for so long that it did this to him." "It can't have been the mirror," I said faintly. I looked at it as well, and nothing's happened to me. But then I saw that Claire had frightened tears in her averted eyes, and an urgency to see myself took over me. At a run, I went to look at the mirror over the bathroom sink, my fingers scratching about for the light. Then I saw my face and turned away, appalled, holding the wreck of it in my hands. Every feature had been reshaped, deformed as though a fishhook had been caught in each and yanked in the direction of the rod. I realized then that the woman in the street had tried to help me, and why the crooked man that she had seen had left the shop abandoned, fleeing the customers that would come after him, wanting his work undone. Finding bandages in the bathroom cupboard, I bound my face with them, unable to bear the sight of it or the thought that I might be seen by others. I sent Claire on leave to her sisters for the week and locked myself into my uncle's house to search as many books on the occult for some way to undo the curse that had stricken us. Online sources I disregarded entirely, being that I suspected the majority would have been written by aspiring authors or fantasists convinced of their inexistent magical prowess. I cared for Silas as well as I could in this time, but I accepted that if I was unable to help him within the next few days, he was likely to die, food unable to pass down the buccal cartilage of his throat. From the slow process of working through my uncle's library, I gained a vague understanding of the rules of the mirror's curse. That the Emporium insisted on operating through such unusual hours implied that it must be sold in person and by night for its effects on the item's previous owner to be reversed. Yet whether the curse had, in fact, been lifted from the store owner or not, I did not know, and had no way of finding out. That was no way without selling the glass myself under the same circumstances, but being that my uncle was its official owner, I was uncertain if trading it on his behalf would much improve our circumstances. Silas was in no fit state to attempt the sale himself. Though he seemed responsive to all I said to him, he was in too much pain to clearly speak or move more than a few labored feet. Realizing how few options were left to me, I created an online store listing for the mirror using a passably similar stock photograph, offering it at a mid-range price and for collection only. It was some days before a buyer latched on and made the purchase. Yet before 2 hours had passed, an attack of guilt took over me, and I hastily refunded the order. It occurred to me that my conscience would be lighter if I ensured the sale of the mirror was to someone worthy of disfigurement rather than an innocent stranger. However, being that I'd aided many so-called bad people in my work as a lawyer, I couldn't bring myself to justify the act. In hindsight, perhaps I should have thrown my scruples to the wind and been done with it all, but by then my mind had wandered to other possibilities surrounding the mirror and its purpose. The store owner had gone through overly complex measures to part with it, ones that would take far more time and effort than would readily be available to a desperate man. The greater likelihood was that each of the items I'd seen through the greasy window of the Emporium had contained the same evil and had been sold for evil's sake. What other reason would the man have to torment others into his own image than bitterness? After all, in writing, I'm no closer to knowing which of my theories was correct, or if there was another yet that I had not thought of. In the days counting down to my uncle's, and the impossibility of our situation lay over me, and when one night I stood up, raw-eyed with lack of sleep from my research, I decided that the mirror had to go. Whatever bad luck came of its disposal could not be any worse than what I'd suffered, I thought. Besides, there were several articles that suggested the breaking and disposing of cursed glass was the safest course of action, and I chose to take their word for it. I was only to throw salt over my shoulder, spin 3 times counterclockwise, or dash the ruined shards into running water afterwards to avoid the 7-year ill tidings. There were more rules to this barely tapped into world of magic than I ever cared to learn. I didn't warn my uncle as to what I was about to do, thinking that it would only distress him, being that he couldn't prevent me, even if he disagreed with my plan. Entering the living room, I picked up one of the chairs stacked around the cluttered table and gingerly approached the covered glass. feeling, as I now always did, a black pressure emanating from it. I left the shawl where it was, thinking, perhaps irrationally, that if the mirror saw me, it would try, in some way, to prevent me from attacking it. So as I raised a chair above my head, I did not see the thing break, only heard the crash as my weapon collided with it, and the ringing of all its little dead pieces along the floor. As they did so, a scream tore across the house, and for an awful moment I was convinced that it was the glass. Only when I noted the direction of that cry did I realize who it was, and ran for the study, stopping just short at the sight of blood weeping along the floor. I had no choice but to step through it as I opened the study door, realizing at once the scale of my mistake. Silas' body had turned over and over itself in rings of bulging flesh, reminding me of a series of images I'd once come across of a factory worker caught and twisted to death in the axis of a machine. My uncle's organs had been thrust out through the mouth by force, and as one last twitch shuddered through him, I understood that he had lived to the end of it. The curse had allowed him that. I saw a spiteful burst of strength. Only as my shock lost its grip on me did I feel the blood on my own face leaking through the bandages. Felt as I raised my shaking hands to touch them how my features had changed. I was too afraid to take the coverings off and look at myself, and still am. In fact, I do not know if I can ever bear to look at myself again. Story 2. I keep thinking I shouldn't post this. Even typing out feels weird, like I'm about to break some rule I don't understand. But here I am. I guess I just need to see if anyone else has felt something like this. It happened at exactly 2:16 a.m. I know that for sure because I had just checked my phone. I couldn't sleep, so I was lying there in bed, scrolling through the usual endless feed. Everything was normal until suddenly it wasn't. The room didn't get cold. Nothing jumped out of the shadows. It was like the whole world took a really long pause. It was so quiet it hurt my ears. I didn't notice the silence at first. It was more like the background hum of everything. My fridge, the cars outside, the wind just faded out. Even the glow from my phone screen seemed kind of muted. For a second I wondered if I'd lost my hearing or if maybe I was dreaming. I got up, feeling stupid and restless, and walked over to the window. The street outside looked like a photograph. A car was stopped right in the intersection, headlights catching the mist. I swear I saw a cat in mid-leap, just above a trash can. Nobody moved. Nothing moved. I remember tapping the glass just to see if anything would react. Nothing did. I started feeling unsettled, but it wasn't fear exactly. It was like something was watching to see what I'd do. I wandered out of my room, walked through the apartment. All the clocks were stuck on 2:16, not just my phone. The red digits on the microwave, the ancient wall clock in the hallway, my wristwatch I never wear, everything frozen. I kept going out into the hallway. Every door was closed except one down at the end. I know my neighbors, and that door is never open. I walked toward it, telling myself I was just curious, not completely losing it. The air felt thicker the closer I got, almost like walking into a steam room. My skin prickled. Inside that open doorway, it was pitch black. Not a normal darkness, but the kind that makes you feel like if you step through, you won't come back. Standing right outside was this little kid. I've never seen her before. She looked up at me, almost bored, and said, "You're awake, aren't you?" Not a question, more like a statement she didn't care if I agreed with. I said something dumb like, "What's going on?" She smiled, the tiniest little grin, and said, "This is the space before morning. Most people sleep through it, even if their eyes are open." I asked her if I was dreaming, and she shrugged, picked up a piece of chalk from her pocket, and started drawing shapes on the hallway wall. It hit me then that I could feel my heart pounding, my breath in my chest, the floor under my feet. I was there, actually there, in a way I don't remember feeling in years. She drew a circle, looked up at me again, and said, "Don't worry. When it starts again, you'll remember." I wanted to ask her what she meant, but before I could, I blinked and the lights came back. The clocks ticked forward to 2:17. The street outside was moving again. The fridge kicked on. My phone vibrated. It was like nothing happened, except everything felt different. Today, everything has a kind of shine to it. People made eye contact on the sidewalk. I noticed a bird song and actually listened. My coffee tasted stronger. I don't know how to explain it except that now. I'm paying attention. I keep thinking about that kid and the way she said I'd remember. I don't know if any of this makes sense. Maybe I finally lost it. But if you're reading this and you felt something weird last night, please tell me I'm not the only one. Even if you just noticed the silence or the way the world seemed to pause. Maybe we just woke up. I keep replaying that moment, standing in the hallway, trying to remember the exact way she looked at me. It's like some part of me has been waiting for that feeling my whole life. The sense that there's more, and that more isn't some big revelation or secret knowledge. It's just this, right here, being present, actually seeing the world instead of just moving through it half asleep. I'm not saying I understand what happened. Hell, maybe nothing did. Maybe it's all a trick of a tired mind and a weird night. But something deep down feels different. Things are sharper, realer. I notice little kindnesses, tiny details. People's faces look new. So here's the honest part. If you've been waiting for a sign, for some moment to say yes, I'm finally ready. Maybe this is it. I think I am. I'm tired of living on autopilot. I want to notice things. I want to actually be here, even if it's hard. If you're reading this and you felt that same pause, or even if you just want to believe that waking up is possible, let's just agree right now to not sleepwalk through whatever comes next. Maybe this is what it means to finally be awake. If you're with me, leave a reply. Even if it's just to say you saw the same thing or you want to. I don't want to forget, and I don't want to be the only one. Maybe that's how it starts. I'm here. I'm ready. Are you? Story 3. Back when I grew up in rural Minnesota, my mother wanted me to keep in touch with my Scandinavian roots. We haven't lived in the Nordic countries for 3 generations, but there are still a couple of things that stick around. Behavioral quirks, mostly, and a couple of traditions that have been with our family for as long as anyone can remember. Putting porridge out for the forest gnomes was one thing. Mom used to trick me with these dolls that she'd put in the snow and point to, saying, "Don't move too fast, you'll scare them." And let's not talk about dancing around the maypole. That stuff's just embarrassing. But the most peculiar tradition is the one about Midsummer Night's Dream. I know, that's a Shakespeare title, but it's also a traditional Scandinavian thing. It goes a little something like this. On the evening of midsummer, you are to collect 7 kinds of wildflowers. Then you bundle them up and put them under your pillow. If you do, you are supposed to dream of your one true love. Now, I have 3 sisters. They were all about romance and predestination, and I couldn't have cared less if I wanted to. But every year they'd walk hand in hand, collecting wildflowers and putting them under their pillows. And since I was too young to wander off on my own, I had to stick around. That is, until they decided it was my turn. It was my oldest sister who made the call. She was 12, and I just turned 7. But she figured the earlier the better. "You have to tell us what she looks like," she said. "Like if she's tall, or thin, or fat." "I bet she's fat," said my second oldest sister. "Statistically, she's Chinese or Indian," said the other. "That's where they're most girls." I tried to ignore them, but their cackling got on my nerves. They gathered up some silky aster, blue-eyed grass, silverleaf, wild bergamot, blue sunflowers, and ground plum, but couldn't get a 7th one. They looked around, but couldn't find one. I just wanted to go home, so I picked up the first thing I saw, sticking out next to a rusted-out barrel. "How about this one?" I said, holding up a yellow flower with a black spot. "That's a black-eyed Susan," said my oldest sister. "You're gonna marry a Susan," grinned another. "Little Susie Woo gonna love you who," sing-sang the last. I rolled my eyes so hard that they almost popped out of my head as they cackled and teased, putting my hair up in a bow. They bundled up the wildflowers and made me sleep with them under my pillow. I didn't notice anything strange at first, just a night like any other. You have such vivid dreams when you're a kid. Like everything just happens faster. You even sleep faster. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't just a dream, it was an experience. And the worst part is, I didn't even remember it. I just remember it was bad. Really, really bad. It was so bad that I completely blocked it out. I don't even remember waking up. I just remember laying in the bathtub submerged in cold water. I looked up at my 3 sisters. They looked terrified. My throat was hoarse and I was wide awake, but I couldn't even remember going to bed. "Does it hurt?" my oldest asked. Her voice was different. Lower, careful. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I'm okay." "It sounded like it hurt," she continued. "Like it really hurt." I think it was a bad dream. Was it her? Asked my youngest sister. Did you dream of her? I couldn't tell. It was just a dark space in the back of my mind that made my pulse shiver when I thought about it. And yet, I knew the answer. Yeah, I said. It was Black-Eyed Susan. Now, I've been teased by my sister my whole life, but they never teased me about Black-Eyed Susan. They'd never seen me like that. I'd woken up screaming at the top of my lungs, rolling around on the floor. They thought I was having a seizure. They took me to the bathroom while my mom called an ambulance. We didn't talk much about it. They never had me checked for epilepsy, and I was perfectly healthy otherwise. They talked a little about it being some kind of allergic reaction, but I'd never seen a reaction like that. Over time, we came to this unspoken conclusion, that those wildflowers gave me the worst nightmare of my life. And in that nightmare, I saw my one true love, Black-Eyed Susan. I wouldn't think much about that night over the years to come. It became this distant memory, like your first cold. But every now and then, particularly around midsummer, I would try to remember what that dream had been like, and something inside me would sink into this bottomless hole in my chest. It teased me. I could concentrate, and I'd see it, but I didn't want to. To have forgotten was a blessing, and I knew better than to challenge it. But it's a weird headspace to live in. To have concepts such as true love and marriage so closely associated with trauma, especially since all other couples in my life were perfectly fine role models. My mother and father were an extraordinary couple, and while my sisters had some dating life drama, nothing bad ever really happened to them. So as I got in my teenage years, I didn't want to chase girls and flirt. I didn't want to fall in love. I joked about it a lot, but the feeling of meeting my one true love felt like throwing my soul down an endless pit. I tried to rationalize it away. It was just a stupid phase, a quirk. It became like a fun party story to tell in my late teens. It was funny, in a way, saying I used to believe in such things. But there was an asterisk stuck to that story every time I told it, a little white lie. I never stopped believing in it. It started to really bother me when I was about 17. At that point, I'd been in short relationships, and I'd been in love, but I couldn't stop thinking that it wasn't real. That asterisk love was out there, and that it was terrifying, something that would make my heart sink into my stomach. So I decided to just bite the bullet and try the whole thing again, to face my fears. So that midsummer, I put together 7 types of wildflowers again, ending with a Black-Eyed Susan. As kids, we're very good at handling pain, or at least we're resilient. We have time to heal, but when you're 17, it hits differently. When I went to bed that night, I had cold sweats, and I couldn't stop thinking about what was waiting behind my closed eyes. Would there be a reaction at all, or had I wasted all this time being anxious about nothing? I closed my eyes and try not to think about it. I counted down from 100, then 200. I twisted and turned, trying to get the sweaty covers to stop sticking to my skin. At the slightest stretch, my eyes would pop open. I'd get this ache in my face from trying to keep them closed. But after hours, something clicked. My muscles relaxed, and I caught a whiff of the flowers from under my pillow. And something inside me screamed at me to turn back, to open my eyes, but it was too late. It felt like looking at the bottom of a pool, but straight ahead. A reflective shimmer, ethereal, but physical at the same time, like a night sky that you can push your hands through. I fumbled with my hands, tried to find something to hold on to. There was this swirl in the back of my head, like having a large drink on an empty stomach. Something reached for me and touched my fingertips. Something as hard as fingernails. It poked and prodded me from different angles. A strange voice seeped through me, neutral, genderless, and with an unusual pronunciation. "Where have you been?" it asked. I tried to regain my footing, but there was nothing to hold on to, just these protrusions from the dark. Finally, I felt myself slowing down. A steadiness, control. Something came out of the dark, eyes so black that their head looked hollow against the night. A vaguely human skull connected to an infinite mass, like a broken flower growing out of cracked concrete. Muscle and vein contracting and compounding at every angle. Ripples of flesh with every offset heartbeat. It's been so long. Something wrapping around my ankle. Tightening. "Come home." My eyes snapped open, but I wasn't awake. I could feel her wrapped around my ankle. I pulled away the covers and watched my foot turn blue. It was bending, and I felt nothing. Then the bone snapped. I've never experienced something like that. I've never broken a bone. And experiencing a trimalleolar fracture in the comfort of your own bed is inhuman. It hurts so bad you lose bladder control. And I couldn't do anything but to fall out of bed and writhe on the floor, but the pain wouldn't go away. I just screamed. I tried to reach for my phone, but it's like it refused to let me reach it. A neighbor heard me. Help came. It would take time for the leg to heal, but bones mend all the time. But true love doesn't. I pushed the thought of love and marriage out of my life for over a decade. I would shy away from coy smiles and flowery laughter. Some people thought I had a problem with my sexuality. Others thought I was under some kind of religious repression. I tried to explain that relationships just weren't my thing, but it's hard to explain without a reason. If I was really pressed about it, I'd say it was a childhood trauma that usually stopped the questions. I do this for years. A string of short-term relationships where I kept hoping and praying I wouldn't fall in love. Anything to keep me away from that dark space. I couldn't tell what was going to happen if I met someone who'd make me feel things. Real things. But life isn't so simple. It would take me years, but when I turned 31, I met her. Lilia hit me like a summer's breeze the first time I talked to her. It was a birthday party, and she was invited by a mutual friend of ours. Lilia had been working overtime and forgotten all about the party, so she joined at the last minute. She showed up in an oversized hoodie and yesterday's jeans, spending most of the night at the snack table looking at her phone. Her enthusiasm started and stopped at bobbing her head to the music. When I saw that we were out of pretzels, I went up to talk to her. Looking for snacks? I asked. Your mom's a snack, she snapped back. All right, yeah, but I was talking about the pretzels. She looked at me like I'd struck gold. She'd been so hell-bent on the idea that I was coming up to hit on her that it never even crossed her mind that she'd eaten a full bowl of salty pretzels. She snort-laughed, apologized, and I felt my heart skip a beat. I knew it was trouble. I liked her. Lilia was a work-from-home back-end developer. She spent most of her days trying to steer her team through rough deadlines and absurd last-minute changes. She explained it as trying to teach cats algebra while falling out of an airplane. She cycled through periods of insane stress to weeks of coasting, which she'd made into an absurd routine. Clearly something she couldn't keep up forever. We didn't start dating right away. We chatted a bit and found out we had a lot in common. She'd been dating this one guy since she was 14 years old and had only recently turned single, so she wasn't eager to get back on the market. She didn't mind my vague trauma. She just liked being around me. I think our friends realized we were dating long before Lilia or I did. We just spent time together until one day when we didn't want it to stop. Still, I couldn't help but think of black-eyed Susan. No matter how soothing Lilia's snores were, I could still lay awake at night. There was a warmth in my chest as I imagined the smell of wildflowers from my pillow, an ache in my leg where I could touch the scars. If I were to truly fall in love, what would happen? Those nights came more often, from once every 6 months or so to every week. After having dated for about a year, Lilia was eager to help me get over the whole thing. She knew it was a trauma, and she knew I didn't want to talk about it, but she couldn't let it go. And of course she couldn't. She was in a loving relationship with a man who couldn't say he loved her, and all she knew was that something had happened. It got to a point where it was driving a wedge between us. She wanted to help, and I wanted her to understand. And I could only think of one way to show her. I had to do it again. On midsummer, we went outside to pick flowers. Lilia was excited, but her smile faded when she felt how serious I was. I did what I'd done every other time. I picked 6 types, and a final flower would pop out of nowhere. And of course, it'd be the black-eyed Susan. I bundled them all up. I could feel a phantom pain cutting into my leg, which gave me a limp. So what are these for? She asked. For sleep, I said, and I'm going to need your help. Sure, yeah, whatever you need. If it looks bad, I need you to wake me up. How do I know if it's bad? I shook my head and took her by the hand. You'll know. I did some preparations. I had gauze and painkillers. Lilia was prepared to call for help if necessary. She still had no idea what was going on, but I could tell she was nervous. Then again, so was I. Problem was I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, and she watched me. After about an hour, she crawled up next to me. She knew it was something that happened when I slept, but she wanted to calm me down. "I need you to see this," I said. "It's okay," she whispered. "Go to sleep. Promise you'll keep watch." "I promise." I didn't turn my head to look. I trusted her. So I closed my eyes, let my breathing slow, and felt my head fill with the smell of wildflowers. It was like waking up again, a mild tingle covering my body, like being draped in spiderwebs. I blinked and blinked, but it was all black. A long, drawn-out breath echoed like a field of sighing flowers. Asterisk beautiful starred, a growth coming out of the dark, translucent, like living glass hardening into soft marble. A woman, dragging her legs through the night like she was trudging through a swamp. She grabbed me by the hand, pulling me along. It felt like I was carried through a current. I could see the bedroom from above. I lay there, and Lilia was sitting next to me. I can't really explain what it felt like. Sort of like watching your reflection blink. I could see her struggling to stay awake, nodding on and off. She was trying so hard. "Is that what beautiful looks like?" Black-eyed Susan asked. "I don't even know what you are," I said. "Of course you do," she said. "I am your one true love." The words slithered, a drawn-out poison in the air. I tried not to look at her. It was like the opposite of staring into a sun. The light in your eyes began to die, and you can feel yourself grow colder. "Slower. You can't be," I said. "It's impossible." "But I am," she said. "You love me." She turned her attention to the room hovering in front of us. I could see little tendrils creep under the furniture, reaching for Lilia and me. Long finger-like limbs and layered scales, bending at painful angles. One pulled down her phone. Another moved a chair. Two of them struggled to move the bed. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Passing the time." One of the tendrils closed around my stomach. There was pressure like someone tightening a belt. It cut into my hips. Before the pain, I could feel a slight pop. "If you love me, why are you hurting me?" I asked. "How else are you going to get used to it?" she asked back. "Get used to what?" She turned to me, breath reeking of ammonia with every spit of a word. "Us." A hand closed around my neck. My eyes flung open. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't feel my legs. I flailed with my arm, reaching for Lilia. She got out of bed, only to find that her phone was gone. "What's wrong?" she asked. "What's happening?" She had to cover her mouth when she saw my neck. She grabbed my arm, but the moment she did, something took hold of her. In the corner of my eye, I saw her getting pulled into the other room, clawing at the carpet with a terrified shriek. My left arm rose out of the bed, as if carried by an unseen string. Two of my fingers popped out of their sockets, like a painful countdown. I couldn't scream. I could barely think. No oxygen. Lilia came running back and grabbed me. She pulled on my arm, and something let go. I fell out of bed, gasping for air as she cradled my head in her arms. I could see color returning to my hands as two fingers turned purple. I didn't feel a thing, but I would in a couple of seconds. "Hold on," Lilia said. "Hold on." Her phone was gone. She bandaged my fingers and tried to keep them straight. "I'm sorry," I gasped. "I'm so sorry." She just shook her head, trying to process what had happened. There were no words. We just stayed there on the floor. But I could see something in the corners of the room, little quirks and shades. Something was waiting for me to let my guard down. "What's hurting you?" she asked. "What is it?" Something broke in me as I swallowed my words. But Lilia deserved the truth. I think she loves me. Over the coming weeks, I tried my best to explain. Lilia was terrified. She'd never seen anything like it, and there was no explanation that could settle her nerves. It's one thing to know someone you care about has trauma, but it is another thing entirely to experience something impossible that can make or break you. But Lilia didn't break. She started asking questions. Why was I targeted? What was this thing? What did it want? But things were getting strange. It's as if thinking about black-eyed Susan brought her closer to us in a physical, literal way, like we were building towards something. I would spot movement in the shadows. I'd notice furniture out of place and hear creaking doors in the middle of the night. And of course, it had to be her. She was playing with me. Lilia would stay up at night reading about various Scandinavian traditions. The cast iron scissors under the pillow, the midsummer pole, the year walk, trolls, elves, dwarves, and gnomes. She gave me lists of things to ask my parents about, to see if our family had been targeted by something ancient or evil. But weeks would come and go, and we wouldn't be anywhere close to an answer. And the shadows would grow longer. Things would disappear. And every night, when I closed my eyes, I'd catch a whiff of earthy wildflowers. Things would quickly progress beyond tricks and shadows. At one point, I was tripped while walking down a flight of stairs. Another time, something pressed down on the gas pedal, sending me straight through a red light. It's a miracle no one was hurt. Lilia wouldn't go unscathed either. Electronics would break or go missing. Odd sounds would wake her up at night. She told me that sometimes she'd see a silhouette outside the window, as if someone was trying to catch a peek of us. Every time she looked closer, it would turn out to be fallen leaves or a peculiar branch. It was stressful, but there wasn't really an option. What else could we do but to stick together and love one another? I don't remember the moment we moved in together. It just made sense since we spent all our time together anyway. She just moved more and more of her stuff in, and all of a sudden her place was pretty much empty. So yeah, we lived together. It wasn't really a conscious decision. Lilia had a couple of rough ideas about what that thing might be. She had a binder with ideas ranging from Arthurian mythology to djinn and some kind of Polish bird demon. None of them fit perfectly though, and frankly, it was such an odd thing for it all to be tied to this one ancient tradition. How could this thing be my true love? What was I missing? We figured it had to be something connected to that very first night back when I was a kid, when it had to put me in the bathtub to wake me up. For a full year, all we did was try to make it to the next day. It affected pretty much every aspect of our lives. The way we slept at night, the way we cooked, the way we did our laundry. There'd always be something messing up the rhythm of the day. It exhausted us, not just mentally and physically, but socially. We stopped going out. Hell, we barely even talked. Instead, we kept our heads down and tried not to think about it too much, silently hoping for the problem to solve itself as Lilia's binder gathered dust. But once the next midsummer came around, there was a difficult discussion to be had. We can't live like this. She'd sat me down at the kitchen table. The light bulb had burned out somehow, despite only being 2 weeks old. "I'm sorry," I said. "I wouldn't blame you if Dash." "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "You know that. So what do we do?" She looked around. The kitchen faucet was leaking again. "I suppose we ought to try something," she said. "You got any suggestions?" "She could kill us," I said. "We can't go there. Maybe we don't have a choice." I just sat there in the dark, counting the seconds. She was right, of course, but that didn't mean I had to like it. As midsummer came, we decided we would do this together. We got a single large pillow and gathered the flowers together. We didn't say a word. We just walked among the wildflowers as a low rumble lingered on the horizon, a damp taste in the air as a storm brewed. But to me, all I could see was the woman I loved and how she carefully brushed her hands against the tall grass. Even now, she could find something to appreciate. Tradition, ritual, and myth be damned. At that moment, there wasn't a force in the world that could convince me that she was anything but my actual true love. We rounded out our wildflowers with a black-eyed Susan. It was hidden next to a rusted-out barrel, as if trying its best to hide. But like every other year I'd done this, I'd find one. And with all 7 wildflowers in hand, we bundled them up and wandered home, hand in hand. We hugged each other tight as we went to bed. Some way, somehow, we would make it through the night. We had to. When I opened my eyes, something felt different. I thought I was standing in sand, but it was more like a fine concrete dust. The moon covered most of the night sky, but I couldn't see any stars. There were black trees in the distance, leafless and skeletonized by years of thirst. Along the horizon was a single large tree, tall enough to almost reach the moon itself. An apocalyptic vision, if anything. "Who are you?" A melodic voice, kind but unsure. I turned around. "Lilia?" My first thought was that she looked taller, but that wasn't it. She was the same as always. It was me that had gotten shorter. My hands were smaller. I looked down at the 7-year-old version of myself, still dressed in my most comfortable childhood jammies. Lilia didn't really sound any different, but a child's ears hear things in other ways. She had the most beautiful voice. "It's me," I said. "Somehow." "You're really cute," she smiled. "But I don't get it." "I don't either. Maybe we're not supposed to. Maybe. We wandered down a trail, hand in hand. There was no one around. No wind blowing through dead plains. No birds in the sky. No chirping cicadas, and no rustling leaves. Just feet on dust. There's no one here, I said. This can't be it. Did we do it wrong? She asked. I don't think so. She's usually here by now. Lilia blinked, looking around. Then something dark settled over her eyes. What if she is? She let go of me and brushed her arms up and down in a self-hug. Something she usually did when stressed. We wandered around for what felt like hours. Nothing happened. No one came to disturb us. It was just her, me, and nothingness. No black-eyed Susan, and nothing to tear us apart. Does this mean you're my true love? She asked. I mean, I'm dreaming of you. That would make you mine too. I smiled. I thought that was occupied. I thought so too. But there was no one there to challenge that claim. We just smiled at one another. That had to be it. Despite it all, something good had to come out of this. But no matter where we went, or for how long, nothing happened. We started to worry. We weren't waking up. We didn't get hungry, or thirsty, or tired. It was just this complete stage of emptiness. We would walk down forgotten paths for what felt like hours, strolling past sand-burnt concrete ruins. I don't know how much time passed. It might have been days, it might have been months. It was impossible to tell, and Lilia always had this amazing ability to make every moment pass by in a flash. She was impossible not to love. Even then, and even there, we'd make jokes and laugh. Though I couldn't get over the feeling of being stuck in my younger self. You don't realize how much you've changed until you step back into old shoes like that. Then I noticed something, a flicker of yellow. Right there, behind a rusted-out old barrel, was a black-eyed Susan. The same yellow flower I'd found on that fateful midsummer night as a kid. I don't know how I recognized it, but I did. It was the same flower, it had to be. I picked it up and showed it to Lilia. Strange, huh? I said, only one of these I've seen around. I wonder what it does, she said. You think it means dash? Her voice cut out. The light warped in front of me, blurring like I was watching through a thin layer of rushing water. I could feel a tingle in my eyes. Lilia looked different, further away. Don't go, she called out. What are you doing? I'm not, I just picked this, I dash. I held it out and dropped it, giving her one last flower. We drifted apart. Something shifted. My head rolled back, and I felt this intense heat settling into my head. Then a coolness, someone trying to lower my temperature. Young voices, terrified. Lilia drifting further away, screaming at me to stay with her. Her voice goes from beautiful to desperate to something else. She would scream how much she loved me, and then scream how much she hated me. I would leave her in that place for what would equate to eternities, for her to twist and turn in a place where she'd have nothing but her thoughts and regrets, where starless sky would seep into her, whispering things to do, ways she would play whenever I returned, her head spinning with tales of jinn and mares and demons. It would just be seconds passing as I felt her disappear, but in those seconds there would be eons. Long enough for a body to forget what humans looked like, for a mind to forget what love is supposed to be, for a word or a phrase to change. True love. An ammonia-reeking scream reflected off a fractured space as she reached for me, trying to pull me back through the breaking light. A hand so warm that it burned my face. How could I be so cruel as to leave her for endless time to suffer? How could I be so selfish? Black-eyed Susan. Lilia, my one true love. Then I woke up. My head burst through the water as I looked up at my three sisters. I was 7 years old and still in my jammies, submerged in the bathtub of my childhood home. And as healthy young minds do, my memories healed themselves, sealing away a trauma for me to uncover years down the line. Life would turn out the same way. Awkward teenage years, short relationships, and I'd come back to that broken place time and time again, and she would play her games, reminding me of the betrayal she felt. And I wouldn't understand. That is, until one night when I woke up alone. We'd gone to bed together, but only one had made it back. I'd lived a life twice, and I hadn't even realized it. I stumbled into the shower, set it to cold, and collapsed. I could just think of one thing to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Another view of the world from behind a shimmer, be it warm tears or running water. Today, I'm 47, never married, no serious dating. I go back to Lilia every year, hoping I can find something to remind her of what she used to be. I've tried bringing things along, something to bring her back with me. I've yet to find anything useful. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes I try to stay a little longer, but the pain is unbearable. I suspect one day she'll kill me and I won't come back. I suppose that's the only way this can end. I try not to think about it, but when I do, I try to convince myself that I will end up the same way as her. Maybe we can find solace in our madness. Maybe we'll live together in a paradise of dust and strange moons. I don't know. I don't think that old tradition just shows you true love. I think it will take you to a place where you can meet. But perhaps that place isn't what it used to be. Maybe there used to be more flowers and dancing. I've asked my sisters about what they've seen the times they've done this. All they tell me about is handsome men and blue skies. I guess we don't all go to the same place. After all, true love isn't the same for everyone. If there truly is someone for everyone, well, then we must face some hard facts. They could live across the world. They could have passed away. Or maybe they're just not what you expected. But the older I get, the less I worry. Maybe I'll wake up in that bathtub a third time years from now. And if not, then at least I get to see her again. There must be something of Lilia left in Black-Eyed Susan. There has to be, or else she wouldn't still be my one true love. That's it for today's creepy Reddit tales. Before we go, I just want to say a quick thanks to all of you for watching, liking, and sticking around. You guys keep this channel going, and I'll be back soon with more stories that'll make your skin crawl. Drop a comment if you've got your own spooky tale to share, and I'll see you in the next one.